trying to keep up with everything happening in business and leadership. I feel ya. It can be a lot, to say the least. You want the good stuff, the core insights, and not a bunch of fluff, right? Well, that's exactly what we're after in this deep dive. We're taking a look at a book that gets right to the point, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, by Ben Horowitz.
You know, one of the things that really grabs you about this book is just how real it is. Horowitz isn't some talking head, He's a founder, a CEO. He's been through it all, the ups, the downs, the whole messy business of actually building companies. What you get from this book isn't some theory, it's battle-tested, hard-won experience.
Yeah, exactly. So think of this deep dive as your shortcut to getting to the core of it all.
Yeah.
The real principles, the nitty-gritty, sometimes uncomfortable truths about leading, building companies, and dealing with the crises that inevitably pop up. It's about understanding what actually matters based on someone who's been in the trenches.
All right, let's jump right in. Horowitz kicks things off with a concept that's super relatable, the struggle. I mean, we know it's not all sunshine and roses, right?
Definitely not. Horowitz lays it out there. This struggle. It's when things go sideways. Product's not doing so hot, the market takes a sudden turn, team morale dips, your cash flow starts looking a little thin. It's when those doubts start creeping in. Like, why did I even start this? Am I really cut out for this? That initial vision, all that excitement, it slams into reality, and it's rough.
What's really fascinating, and something for all of us listening to think about, is how intense those emotions are. Horowitz talks about feeling isolated, even when you're surrounded by people, and that initial fire, that passion, it starts to fade. I bet anyone who's dealt with some serious professional challenges, you know what that feels like. So right off the bat, a key takeaway. Expect the struggle. It's not some weird anomaly. It's often woven into the fabric of the journey. Recognizing that feeling of being alone, those doubts, it can help you find ways to deal with them.
Totally. Now, a huge part of getting through the struggle and just running a company in general is honesty, transparency. You've got to build a culture where people aren't afraid to bring problems to the surface.
This brings up something interesting, doesn't it? It kind of pushes back against some of the traditional management wisdom out there, that saying, don't bring me a problem without a solution. What's Horowitz's take on that?
He's a little wary of that approach, and here's why. It's one of those things where the intention, the idea of getting people to solve problems proactively might be good, but it can have a really bad side effect. It can shut down vital information. Think about it. An employee sees a problem, but they don't have a solution right off the bat. What happens then? Do you want them to just keep quiet? Horowitz says a company that hides its problems just ends up frustrated and takes way longer to fix things. So something really important for all of us to consider. What kind of environment are we creating? Are we rewarding people for flagging problems, even if they don't have a fix right away? Knowing about an issue early on can be huge.
And that open culture is crucial when it comes to making those really tough calls. The ones that affect your team directly, like layoffs. It's a situation no one wants to be in. What stands out to you about Horowitz's advice on handling layoffs the right way?
The first thing he makes clear is that the CEO, they need to address the whole company before anything else happens, before any individual conversations. It's about providing context. Explain why this is happening, what's going on with the business. And this is crucial, making clear to the people staying that this isn't about their performance. This is a decision the company needs to make. Bill Campbell, a mentor to Horowitz, gave him some great advice on this. The message is for the people who are staying. You've got to recognize the impact on morale, on trust, and address it head on.
Yeah, that really drives home the point that these decisions have ripple effects. What about actually letting employees know they're being laid off? How does that happen?
Their direct manager, that's who delivers the news, face to face. Horowitz is firm on that. It shows respect for the work they've done. The manager needs to explain the situation briefly again, focusing on the company's situation, not pointing fingers. They have to be direct, say that the decision is final, and have all the details ready to go. Benefits, support, all of that. No ambiguity, no room for arguing at that moment. It's about balancing a difficult situation with basic decency. And believe it or not, treating people well on their way out actually has a positive impact on the people who stay.
Let's switch gears to another tough personnel decision. Firing an executive. It's a different animal than a layoff, isn't it?
For sure. The stakes are higher, and it can get really personal. What's interesting about Horowitz's approach here is the order he recommends. It all starts at the top.
He says the board needs to be informed first. Why is that so important?
It's not just about keeping them in the loop. It's about getting their buy-in, their input on the severance package. And this is important, figuring out how to handle this so the departing executive's reputation isn't trashed. There's no benefit to publicly bashing someone who used to be in a leadership position.
That's a smart and mature way to handle it. So what's next?
Once the board is on board, the CEO has to talk to the executive directly, one-on-one. Horowitz got a great piece of advice from Bill Campbell here. He said, Ben, you cannot let him keep his job, but you absolutely can let him keep his respect. Be direct, be firm, but let the person leave with their dignity.
And then it's all about communicating with the rest of the company, right? Quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Horowitz says there's a specific order for this. First, you talk to the executive's direct reports, then the whole staff, then the rest of the company, ideally all on the same day. And when you're talking to those direct reports, you need a plan. Who are they reporting to now? What are the next steps? Are you going to search for a replacement? Reorganize, promote someone internally. You've got to lay it all out, give people clarity, stability, reassure them that leadership is still in control, that there's a plan.
Okay, let's get into something even trickier, potentially awkward. Demoting a loyal friend. It's something a lot of founders face as their company grows.
It gets to the heart of the challenges of scaling, doesn't it? Someone who was a rock star in the early days, they might not have the skills or experience you need as things evolve. What does Horowitz say are the most important things to think about here?
He's adamant about making a firm decision first. Don't go into that conversation hoping to figure it out as you go. You've got to accept the fact that your friend might decide to leave the company. You also need to be crystal clear about what this new role is. And then when you have the conversation, your language really matters.
Absolutely. Horowitz says use strong language. Direct. I have decided. That kind of thing. None of that wishy-washy stuff that leaves room for argument or gives false hope. He also says acknowledge the reality. You might have limitations, even as the CEO. And having someone who's not up to snuff in a key role, that can really hurt the company down the road. But at the same time, acknowledge their past contributions. Make it clear this decision is about what the company needs going forward, not about their past performance. Now, this is interesting. Horowitz suggests thinking about giving them a raise in their new role. It can help them feel valued, appreciated, even though they've been demoted. It's a balancing act. You're trying to do what's best for the company and maintain a friendship.
Yeah, it's a tightrope walk, that's for sure. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about hiring. Horowitz has some really insightful things to say about bringing in executives from those big established companies into the startup world. It might seem like a no-brainer, get some seasoned leadership in there, but he points out some potential problems. One is what he calls a rhythm mismatch. What does that mean?
So you've got these executives, they're used to a certain pace, a certain way of doing things. Formal emails, scheduled meetings, set processes, that's how those big companies work. But a startup, especially one that's growing fast, it's a lot more fluid. You need people who can take initiative, who can move quickly. If a big company exec waits around for things to happen in a startup, they're going to be waiting a long time. And that can cause friction, even suspicion among the existing team.
It's not just about speed, though, is it? The skills you need can be fundamentally different.
Exactly. Running a large established company, it's a lot about complex decision-making, intricate organizational structures, streamlining processes. But building a startup from the ground up, you need a much more hands-on approach. You're creating those initial processes. You're setting up the basic organizational structure. You're keeping a close eye on hiring and making sure the quality's there. So the big takeaway here is that just because someone's been successful in a big company doesn't mean they're going to thrive in a startup.
It's a good reminder that you've got to evaluate experience and context. What stage is the company at? What's the culture like? All that stuff matters. Now, Horowitz singles out one type of hire that he says is absolutely critical: sales leaders. And he tells a great story that really brings this home. He talks about how he learned more about effective sales in a single conversation with a potential hire than he had in months of managing sales himself. Tell me about that.
Oh yeah, this is the story about Mark Cranny. He was interviewing for a VP of sales position. And in just an hour, Horowitz realizes, I don't know nearly enough about sales. Cranny, he just gets it. Sales strategy, the whole game. He even had insights into deals that Horowitz's own sales team seemed to be missing. That experience was a real eye-opener for Horowitz. It made him realize how important it is to really vet your sales leadership. Find someone who's a true expert and be open to learning from them. It's like in those key areas where you're not the expert, find the people who are and let them teach you.
Which brings us to another important concept from the book, the peacetime CEO versus the wartime CEO. Horowitz borrowed this from Andy Grove. It's a really useful way to think about how leadership styles need to change depending on the circumstances. What's the main difference between these two kinds of leaders?
A peacetime CEO, their main focus is on expansion. They want to grow the market, be the leader, optimize for efficiency. It's all about building on what's already working. A wartime CEO, on the other hand, they're dealing with a threat, something that could wipe out the whole company. Their focus is on survival, making tough decisions, sometimes unpopular ones, but they're all about keeping the company alive.
And Horowitz gives some great examples to illustrate this, doesn't he?
He does. Google, they wanted to make the internet faster, way faster. That's a peacetime goal. They're extending the market, cementing their position. Intel, on the other hand, they decided to get out of the memory chip business. The Japanese competition was just too fierce. That's a classic wartime move, a huge strategic shift, all about survival. So for everyone listening, think about what your situation is. Are things pretty stable? Are you growing? That's a peacetime environment. But if there are some serious underlying threats, you might need to shift into that wartime mindset. The kind of leadership you need is totally different.
Exactly right. Okay, let's talk about something that might not be so obvious, but is really important for long-term success. Management debt. Horowitz compares it to technical debt, something a lot of tech people understand. What is management debt and how does it build up?
Think about it like this. Technical debt is like when you take shortcuts in your code to get things done quickly. Might seem fine at first, but it comes back to bite you later. Management debt is the same idea. It's those bad consequences that build up from making decisions that are easy in the moment or maybe not the best in the long run. Like you're constantly avoiding those tough performance conversations. You're letting underperformers slide. You're slapping together organizational structures without thinking about the big picture. It might feel good in the short term, but it comes with a price. It accumulates interest.
What does that interest look like when it comes to management debt?
Well, it shows up as poor team performance, lack of direction. Accountability goes out the window. Trust erodes. And here's the kicker. You become less and less willing to deal with tough issues in the future, even when you really need to. It drags down the whole organization. So the key insight is this. Little management shortcuts can snowball into a mountain of dysfunction. You've got to identify and deal with those issues early before they cripple your team.
That's a really smart comparison. So let's move on to ambition. Horowitz, leaning on Andy Grove's wisdom here, makes a distinction between the right kind of ambition and a kind that can be harmful. What's the key difference?
Grove says the right kind of ambition is all about the company's success. The executive, their success, that comes naturally as a result of the company doing well. The wrong kind of ambition, it's all about the individual. They want to climb that ladder no matter what happens to the company. And here's the thing. This has a huge impact on company culture, on whether you have a lot of internal politics.
So how does that difference in ambition play into office politics?
When people are driven by the wrong kind of ambition, they're more likely to play games. They're maneuvering to get ahead, even if it hurts the company. To stop this, Horowitz says you need clear, solid processes for those areas where politics can thrive. Performance reviews, compensation, how your organization is structured, promotions, all that stuff. Those processes need to be transparent. Everyone needs to know the rules. And they need to be based on merit, on what's good for the company, not personal agendas. It levels the playing field, makes it harder for people to just look out for themselves.
It's all about creating systems that prioritize the company over individual gain. Now, when a company's facing a serious threat, maybe even a threat to its existence, Horowitz talks about lead bullets versus silver bullets. What's the difference and why does it matter so much in a crisis?
A silver bullet. That's the mythical solution that fixes everything. The lead bullets, those are the few crucial things you absolutely have to get right to survive. When you're in a tough spot, you don't have the time or resources to chase every possible solution. You have to pick those make-or-break priorities, your lead bullets, and go all in on them. Focused, relentless action. It's about surviving.
It's a powerful reminder that when things get really rough, focusing on the most important things isn't just helpful, it's crucial. You can't afford to get distracted, can't rely on hoping for a miracle. You've got to identify those core threats and hit them head on.
Right. Now, scaling a company, it can feel like this big mystery. And Horowitz wants to demystify it. He goes beyond the usual advice you hear from boards, hire experienced people, build scalable processes. He dives into something that's often overlooked but is super important, organizational design. And here's the interesting part. His starting point is all organizational designs are bad. Why does he say that? Seems kind of negative, right?
It's actually a pretty practical point. He's saying that any structure you create, it's going to help communication and decision-making in some parts of the organization, but it's going to hurt it in others. Like, say you put product management under engineering. That might make things smoother between those two teams, but it could create friction with marketing or sales. So the second you put a new structure in place, people are going to find things to criticize, and they'll probably be right.
So it's not about finding this perfect organizational chart that works for everyone. It's about being aware of the trade-offs you're making and being intentional about them. What steps does Horowitz recommend for approaching organizational design in a more effective way?
He lays out 6 steps. First, figure out what information needs to flow through the organization. Second, figure out what kinds of decisions need to be made. Third, prioritize those communication and decision pathways based on your strategy and what challenges you're facing. Fourth, and this is a big one, decide who's going to lead each group after you've optimized for communication and decision-making, not before. Fifth, identify those communication paths that you intentionally didn't optimize. And finally, come up with a plan to deal with any issues that might arise from those less optimized paths. The whole point is the lifeblood of any organization is communication and decision-making. If those things can't happen efficiently, your structure, no matter how good it looks on paper, is going to fail.
It's a very deliberate, thoughtful approach. It's about putting the organization's needs first, not individual roles or preferences. And he also makes a point about the purpose of process, especially as a company scales. It's all about making communication work.
Okay, let's talk about the CEO role specifically. Horowitz argues that there's one skill that's the toughest to master, but also the most crucial. What is that essential CEO skill?
Making decisions with incomplete information. That's it. When a CEO has to make a bet the company decision, they're almost never going to have all the data they want.
Right.
And here's the thing, those big, important decisions, they're often the ones that are going to be unpopular. They involve risk. It takes guts to move forward, to commit the company to a course of action when you don't have all the answers and people are pushing back. It speaks to the weight of the CEO's responsibilities. You got to be decisive, even when things are unclear.
Absolutely. So, given how complex and high stakes the CEO role is, how do you even begin to evaluate how they're doing? Horowitz gives 3 key areas to look at. What are they?
Did they set a clear vision, a strong strategy? Horowitz is big on this. Strategy is the company's story. It's what guides everything. Second, did they build a top-notch team? The kind of team that can execute that strategy. It's not just about how many people they hired, it's about the quality of that talent. And third, did they get results? Did they achieve what they set out to do? And he's careful to say that setting the right goals in the first place is just as important as hitting them. So it boils down to this: a clear plan, the right people, and proven results. Sounds simple, but it's anything but.
Not simple at all. Now, Horowitz includes some great anecdotes in the book. They give you a glimpse into what he went through, the unconventional paths he had to take. What are some that really stand out to you?
There's one about his father. He was 73 at the time, and he mentions a trip to Queensbridge, that tough housing project in New York. Turns out, when his dad was 11 years old, he was there distributing communist literature. It's this unexpected, humanizing glimpse into his family history. Then there's the brutal feedback he got from investors when he was trying to raise money. They basically told him, "Ben, we thought you were smoking crack." It shows you the pressure CEOs are under, the scrutiny. And then there's this really scary story about his wife. She almost died from an allergic reaction during their IPO roadshow. It puts things into perspective, the pressures of business versus life and death.
Those stories definitely highlight the human cost, the high stakes. Are there any lighter, maybe more quirky anecdotes that come to mind?
Oh yeah, there's the Freaky Friday story. It's this crazy management technique he used. He had a conflict between his sales engineering and customer support teams. They just couldn't get along. So he had the executives in charge of those teams switch jobs for a week. Same minds, different responsibilities. It's wild, but it worked. They got a much better understanding of each other's challenges, and they actually came up with solutions. It's a great example of thinking outside the box to solve organizational problems. And lastly, Horowitz talks about his move into venture capital and why he wrote The Hard Thing About Hard Things in the first place.
What made him want to share these sometimes difficult, uncomfortable experiences?
He felt like a lot of the business advice out there, it was sugar-coated. It didn't talk about the real struggles, the mistakes, the hard lessons learned. He wanted to give a more honest account of what it's actually like to build and run a company.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the hard thing about hard things, what are the big takeaways you think our listeners should walk away with?
I think it boils down to this: building and leading a successful company, especially when things get tough, It requires honesty. It requires courage, the guts to make decisions when you don't have all the answers. And it requires focusing on the right things, taking care of your people, making those tough personnel decisions the right way, and having a solid strategy that you communicate clearly. The struggle, it's not some weird outlier. It's part of the game. And this book gives you a roadmap for navigating those difficult times, a roadmap based on real-world experience.
And here's one last thought for you to ponder. As you're going through your own professional journey, you hit those inevitable challenges. Take a step back. Ask yourself, is this a wartime situation or a peacetime situation? Does your leadership style, your mindset match what's needed? Think about that management debt you might be building up without even realizing it. And maybe most importantly, how clear is your company's story? That strategy that guides your every move. Understanding those hard things that Ben Horowitz lays out so frankly, that's crucial for anyone who wants to make a real impact in their career.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. If anything we've talked about today really resonated with you, we highly recommend checking out The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's a treasure trove of practical wisdom. Until our next deep dive, keep learning, keep leading.
Trying to keep up with everything happening in business and leadership. I feel ya. It can be a lot, to say the least. You want the good stuff, the core insights, and not a bunch of fluff, right? Well, that's exactly what we're after in this deep dive. We're taking a look at a book that gets right to the point, The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz.
You know, one of the things that really grabs you about this book is just how real it is. Horowitz isn't some talking head, he's a founder, a CEO, he's been through it all, the ups, the downs, the whole messy business of actually building companies. What you get from this book isn't some theory, it's battle-tested, hard-won experience.
Yeah, exactly. So think of this deep dive as your shortcut to getting to the core of it all.
Yeah.
The real principles, the nitty-gritty, sometimes uncomfortable truths about leading, building companies, and dealing with the crises that inevitably pop up. It's about understanding what actually matters based on someone who's been in the trenches.
All right, let's jump right in. Horowitz kicks things off with a concept that's super relatable, the struggle. I mean, we know it's not all sunshine and roses, right?
Definitely not. Horowitz lays it out there. This struggle, it's when things go sideways. Product's not doing so hot, the market takes a sudden turn, team morale dips, your cash flow starts looking a little thin. It's when those doubts start creeping in. Like, why did I even start this? Am I really cut out for this? That initial vision, all that excitement, it slams into reality. And it's rough.
What's really fascinating, and something for all of us listening to think about, is how intense those emotions are. Horowitz talks about feeling isolated even when you're surrounded by people, and that